The two girls were found gasping for breath on the cold kitchen floor, alone, silent, forgotten. No calls, no footprints. Just a silence as thick as ice. No one noticed, except for a war dog named Valor. It stopped at their door and refused to move. It growled once, then barked with such force that it shattered everything. When the soldier burst in, what they saw did not break the silence, but made everyone cry. And what happened next, no one could have predicted. The snow hadn't stopped since midnight. It fell in long, silent threads across the town of Maple Hollow, coating rooftops and mailboxes in a soft hush that muted everything's sounds, movements, even memories. By morning, the roads were barely passable, the sidewalks untouched. Streetlights flickered dimly through the fog cold, and the few cars that braved the dawn moved like ghosts under the heavy gray sky. Eli Grant sat behind the wheel of the community patrol truck, his breath fogging the inside of the windshield. His hands, dark and calloused, gripped the wheel loosely, more out of routine than alertness. He wore a black military-grade jacket over his civilian uniform, the sleeves frayed at the cuffs. His hair was close-cropped, peppered with gray that hadn't been there before the war. His eyes deep brown, tired, and still rarely blinked. He scanned the quiet street with the slow calculation of someone trained to see what others missed. He had been back from Afghanistan for 5 years, long enough for people to stop thanking him for his service, long enough for the echo of explosions to be replaced by a quieter kind of silence. His wife, Lena, a combat medic who had once stitched his torn side under fire, didn't make it home. A drunk driver hit her on her way to the grocery store, 3 months after they'd finally settled. Since then, Eli hadn't spoken much, not to people anyway. He didn't need to, not with Valor beside him. Valor lay curled on the passenger seat, head resting on his massive paws. A German shepherd with a deep sable coat, streaked with rich black and rust-brown tones. Valor moved like a creature made of shadow and purpose. He had been trained for war bomb detection, search and rescue, field loyalty. But since returning, he'd become something else. Eli's echo. The two of them communicated without words. When Eli twitched, Valor watched. When Eli stared too long at something unseen, Valor rested his head on his lap, grounding him without noise. They weren't officially police anymore. Not in the traditional sense. Eli worked part-time as a community responder, a mix between neighborhood security and social outreach. Valor was technically retired, but the dog never left Eli's side. The town of Maple Hollow, population just under 9,000, had grown used to the pair. People waved, offered coffee from time to time, but mostly they left them alone. Eli didn't mind. He preferred the silence. Until that morning. As they turned onto Cedar Street, Eli slowed. The houses here were older, set back from the curb behind creaking porches and frost-covered hedges. At 111 Cedar, Valor stirred. His ears twitched once, then again. Eli glanced at him, a flick of the eye. The dog lifted his head. "Something wrong?" Eli asked quietly, the way one speaks in church. Valor didn't move at first, just stared at the small blue house, its paint peeling, shutters crooked, mailbox bent under the weight of frozen letters. Then he growled. Low, deep. A sound Eli hadn't heard in months. The last time had been outside Kandahar, right before the IED went off. Eli's foot had nearly stepped on a pressure plate when Valor lunged and knocked him back. Now that same sound rumbled from the dog's throat. Then without cue, Valor stood and pressed his nose to the glass. His breath fogged the window. His body tensed. Eli braked gently, pulling the truck to a full stop in front of the house. There were no tire tracks in the driveway, no footprints on the porch. The curtains were drawn shut, sagging like tired eyes. The mailbox overflowed with unopened letters, and no smoke rose from the chimney. Eli opened the door. The cold hit him like a slap. Valor leapt out ahead of him, landing silently in the snow. Together they walked toward the porch. The wood creaked under their weight. Eli knocked twice. "Hello," he called. "Anyone home?" "This is Community Patrol. Just checking in." No answer. Valor began pacing. His tail was low, ears back, the tip of his nose brushing the seam at the base of the door. Then, without warning, he barked. Once, Loud. Final. Eli blinked. Valor? The dog barked again. Then he scratched at the door, frantic, nails scraping away blue paint in streaks. Eli tried the knob. Locked. He knocked harder. Still no sound inside. And then Valor howled. A short, agonizing wail that cut through the morning like a blade. Eli's gut twisted. With one hard breath, he stepped back and kicked. Once. Twice. The third strike cracked the door open. A wave of stale air poured out cold, dead, sour. He moved fast, hand on his sidearm, body crouched low. Valor pushed past him and disappeared into the house, nails tapping across the floor. Clear, Eli whispered to himself, though his voice felt foreign. He followed down a narrow hallway that reeked of old grease and mildew. The living room was dark, television unplugged, mail stacked on a dusty side table. Family photos hung crookedly on the walls. A blanket lay folded on the couch, untouched. The heater hadn't run in days. And then he smelled it. Something sharper. Sweat. Moldavian burnt oil. Something else. The kitchen was dim, the blinds half drawn. The refrigerator door hung open, casting a pale glow. On the floor beside the oven lay two small bodies. Eli froze. Twin girls, maybe 6. Their legs tangled together, arms wrapped around each other like they had tried to keep warm. Their clothes were filthy, matching pink sweatshirts, one stained with egg yolk, the other smeared with something darker. Their hair was tangled, matted on one side. Their faces were ghostly pale. One of them stirred. Valor crept close and lay down beside them. He nuzzled the nearer girl gently, pressing his body against hers. She flinched, then whimpered. "Doggy," she rasped. Eli dropped to his knees. "Hey," he whispered. "I'm Eli. You're safe now." Her sister let out a weak cough. He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Community Responder Eli Grant. I need immediate medical assistance at 111 Cedar Street. 2 children unresponsive but alive. House is unsecured. Proceed with caution. Over." He turned back. The girls didn't cry. They just breathed, shallow and rapid, their bellies swollen under their shirts. They were starving, worse than that, surviving. Valor let out a soft growl, almost a plea. Eli reached out, pulled the emergency thermal blanket from his coat, and wrapped it around both girls. They didn't resist. They couldn't. One of them blinked, eyes barely open. Her lips moved. "Are you an angel?" she whispered. Eli swallowed the lump rising in his throat. "No," he said. "But he might be," glancing at Valor. Outside, the wail of sirens began to rise, distant but drawing closer. Eli scooped both girls into his arms, weightless as paper, and carried them out the door into the falling snow. The hospital doors had barely closed behind him when Eli Grant turned back toward Cedar Street. He had left the twins Ava and Aria in the care of nurses and an ER doctor who barely blinked at the sight of a man in a tactical coat cradling 2 unconscious children. It was as if, even in their quiet mountain town, the staff at Mercy Peak Hospital had seen this kind of neglect before. But Eli hadn't. Not like this. Not in a place that should have known better. Valor rode in the back of the truck this time, his large frame pressed against the window, eyes locked ahead like he understood where they were going. Eli didn't speak. There was a noise in his chest he hadn't felt in years, a kind of humming ache that wasn't pain exactly, but the memory of it. The house at 111 Cedar stood unchanged, still, as if nothing extraordinary had happened there that morning. The front door sagged on its hinges from where Eli had kicked it in. Inside, the same stale air greeted him, thick with dampness and spoiled food. He moved with practiced caution, flashlight in hand even though it was midday. Valor followed, quiet and alert, the fur along his back slightly raised. He started in the kitchen, where remnants of the girls' attempts at survival still lingered. An empty jar of peanut butter, a spoon caked with something unidentifiable. The fridge door had swung fully open now, revealing the pitiful contents in full. Half a boiled potato, a moldy sandwich, a bottle of milk so far expired the date had curled off the label. He crouched near the stove. A small pan still sat there, dried remains of whatever concoction the girls had tried to cook clinging to its bottom. On the countertop lay a cracked plate with two bite-sized hot dog slices, neatly arranged beside an open can of corn. There was no rhythm to the meal prep, just desperation. Then he saw it, a crayon drawing pinned under a magnet on the side of the fridge, partly obscured by a calendar stuck at April. He gently pulled it free. Three stick figures, one tall, with squared shoulders and dark scribbles for hair. Two smaller figures beside him, hands joined. Behind them, a large dog with pointy ears. Above it all, a stove with angry red squiggles flames. Smoke? The drawing wasn't precise, but the message was loud. Danger. Fire. And in the corner, one word written backward in a child's unsure hand. Valor. He didn't know when he'd knelt down, or when his fingers began to tremble around the paper. But for a moment, Eli didn't see crayon marks or a messy kitchen. He saw a sand bunker in Helmand Province. He saw a child's hand reaching up from the rubble. He heard his wife's voice on the radio, steady even as mortar shells fell. You're the father these kids never had, Eli. He blinked. The drawing fell gently to the floor. Valor whined beside him, breaking the memory. The dog stood still, his nose now pointed toward the back hallway. Eli rose, heart steadying. Let's check it, he said. They moved past a small bathroom, its mirror fogged with grime, the sink crusted with toothpaste hardened into ridges. The hallway grew darker as they approached the back room. There were no lights, power had long since gone out. Eli paused before pushing open the door. The bedroom smelled of mothballs and something older. The bed was made, a floral quilt spread across it with military precision. On the dresser were framed photos, one of a young woman in military fatigues, another of a smiling older woman in a teacher's outfit standing in front of a chalkboard. The latter wore the same kind of floral pattern as the quilt. Eli recognized her. Lorraine Bell, he murmured, and then he heard it, a faint rustling. His hand hovered near the sidearm out of instinct. But he didn't draw. Instead, he stepped toward the closet. The door was ajar. Inside, huddled among coats and old boxes of Christmas decorations, sat an elderly woman. Thin, wrinkled, dressed in a summer skirt and a faded yellow blouse with daisies embroidered across the collar. Her bare feet were blue at the tips, curled under her. Her white hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders, tangled and limp. She was murmuring softly to herself. Eli crouched down. "Ma'am," he said gently, "my name is Eli Grant. I'm with Community Response." She looked up. Her eyes, cloudy with early cataracts, blinked slowly. For a moment, there was confusion, then recognition, then confusion again. "You're not the mailman," she said. "He wears green. You wear dark. But Chester doesn't like either of you." "Is Chester your dog?" "He's brown. He barks too much. The girls don't like it. I told him no barking at breakfast." Eli's throat tightened. He didn't correct her. "Your granddaughter's Ava and Aria. They're at the hospital. They're safe now." She smiled vaguely, then frowned. "Did Elizabeth remember their lunch?" "She never remembers the juice box, just the sandwich." "That's not enough. They need fruit." "Elizabeth was your daughter?" "Cancer," she whispered, almost inaudibly. "Took her fast. Too fast to hold." The pieces began to slide into place. Elizabeth had died. The girls left behind. Lorraine left alone with them, her memory fading like old wallpaper. Eli looked around the room. Nothing that resembled a child's toy or drawing. No sign of supervision. She had likely forgotten they were here. Valor pressed closer into the room, sniffed at her feet, then sat quietly. Lorraine reached out, patting his head as if he were familiar. "Chester?" she asked, voice barely above a breath. "No," Eli said steady. "This is Valor." She smiled. "Good name. Strong name. He found them, didn't he?" Eli nodded slowly. She closed her eyes. "I get so tired lately," she murmured, "like the walls are stealing the air. I thought the girls were sleeping. I left soup on." Eli gently took the old coat from the hook behind the door and wrapped it around her shoulders. "I'm going to take you somewhere warm, somewhere they can help you remember." She nodded faintly. It took time, but he helped her to her feet. She weighed next to nothing. As they left the room, Eli glanced back once. A faded family photo sat on the bedside table, Elizabeth as a girl, holding a brown puppy in her arms. Her mother beside her, smiling, whole. The house behind them creaked as the door closed. It was no longer a home, just a structure that had forgotten how to care. The pediatric wing at Mercy Peak Medical Center wasn't built for miracles. It was small 6 beds in total, tucked behind a hallway painted with peeling murals of sunflowers and bears in blue scrubs. But it was quiet and warm and filled with the kind of tired kindness that nurses carry in their pockets like peppermints. It was where life restarted, slowly and shakily, for 2 little girls who had come in wrapped in thermal blankets in silence. Ava and Arya Bell were admitted with core temperatures dangerously low, their stomachs distended from a mixture of malnutrition and internal inflammation. The attending pediatrician, Dr. Clarissa Wren, was the first to assess them. She was in her late 30s, tall with sharp cheekbones and dark hair pinned back in a braided bun. Born and raised in southern Denver, she'd moved to Maple Hollow 5 years ago for quiet skies and a slower pace. Though this case had quickly reminded her that pain didn't honor zip codes. She adjusted her glasses and examined the girls with clinical calm, but her voice cracked when she reviewed the lab results. Parasites, vitamin deficiencies, severe dehydration. She muttered to no one, "They've been surviving on hope and pantry scraps." One nurse, a petite woman named Lorna, with dyed rose gold hair and constellation tattoos down her neck, tried coaxing the girls to sleep in their assigned beds. Arya only whimpered. Ava reached out blindly, hands searching for something that wasn't there. That was when Valor entered. Eli hadn't intended to bring him inside. Hospital rules were clear, but the dog had followed him without question, tail low, eyes alert. No one stopped them. And when he approached the twins' bed and rested his head gently beside Ava's hand, her fingers curled into his fur like a child remembering a lullaby. The machines beeped steadily. Ava whispered one word, "Valor." He didn't move after that, not when nurses changed the IV lines, not when Arya cried in her sleep, not when Lorna gently lifted Ava's wrist to check her vitals. The German shepherd simply lay between the beds, body positioned in protective symmetry, a sentinel, a shadow. Eli sat in a chair by the window, watching them. His coat was still damp from the snow, his eyes bloodshot from the night. He hadn't spoken since checking the girls in, but he didn't need to. His silence was heavier than words. It wasn't until the soft click of heels echoed down the hallway that he stirred. Diane Monroe was not a woman easily impressed. 53 years old, with skin the color of pecan shells and eyes like flint, she had spent the last 20 years as a child welfare specialist in Colorado. She wore navy slacks, a pale silk blouse, and a trench coat dusted with salt from the outside snow. Her gray-streaked afro was pulled into a low bun, and a heavy leather tote was slung over one shoulder, packed with case files and guarded skepticism. She had heard about the Bell twins through an emergency intake call. Malnourished minors, deceased mother, grandmother unfit for guardianship, unknown paternity, no other relatives on file. A community patrol officer had entered the residence. That was what the report said. What it didn't say, what she saw the moment she stepped into the room, was the look on Ava's face as she murmured to the dog, or the way Arya, still half sedated, reached for Eli's coat when he stood up to greet her. "Mr. Grant?" Diane's voice was crisp. "I'm Diane Monroe with CPS." Eli nodded. "Thanks for coming." She didn't sit. Instead, she glanced between the beds. "They recognize you. They were alone. I was the one who found them. That doesn't mean they should bond with you." "I didn't say they should." Eli paused, eyes flicking toward the twins. "But they have." Diane stepped closer to Arya's bed. The girl's tiny hand flinched in her sleep. Then softly she whispered, "Not the dark. Don't lock it." The woman froze. "Did you hear that?" Eli nodded. "She said something similar earlier. Has she said anything else?" "Mostly their names. And doggy." Diane exhaled slowly. She turned to him. "We're initiating temporary protective custody, but there's no foster placement open within 2 hours' drive." The system stretched, especially for sibling pairs. She hesitated. "If they're calm around you, it may be best for you to stay with them for now." Only under supervision, until we find better placement. Eli looked at the girls, then back to Valor, who hadn't blinked in minutes. They sleep when he's nearby, he said. That's better than anything I've done. Diane tilted her head slightly, studying him. You ex-military? Yes. Seen combat? Yes. Lost someone? Eli's jaw tightened. My wife, she was a medic, saved my life but not her own. Diane said nothing for a long moment. Then quietly she pulled a notepad from her bag and scribbled something down. Don't mistake my silence for softness, Mr. Grant, she said. I've seen cases like this go sideways. Kids bond too fast. Adults mean well but don't follow through. These girls, she paused, they're already shattered. If you step in, you stay in. Understood? Eli didn't flinch. Understood. The next night, Arya woke screaming. The fluorescent lights buzzed above her, and her IV stand clattered to the side as she tried to bolt upright. Eli was already out of the chair, Valor at his side. The dog leapt onto the bed without hesitation, placing his body between Arya and the wall. She curled against him, sobbing into his fur. Ava had sat up too, wide-eyed, but silent. Eli crouched beside her bed and whispered, You're safe. No one's locking anything. Arya, gasping through her cries, clung to Valor. She forgot. She forgot we were there. We knocked. The door was locked. Eli nodded, gently smoothing her hair back. You're never going back to that room. Across the hall, Diane had been watching through the small glass window. Her notepad stayed closed in her lap. She didn't take notes that time. She just watched. Later that night, after both girls had finally drifted back into sleep, Valor still resting between their beds, Diane approached Eli with a cup of hospital coffee. She only screamed when you weren't in the room, she said. Eli accepted the coffee. That means I shouldn't leave again. She nodded. I'll start the paperwork for extended observation. In the meantime, I'll let the nurses know if the dog stays, the girls sleep. And if the girls sleep. Diane looked at him for the first time with something close to hope. Maybe they heal. It had been 6 days since the hospital, 6 days of quiet routines, whispered words, and healing that came not in leaps, but in fragments. Ava and Arya Bell now lived in the spare bedroom of Eli Grant's modest 2-bedroom rental, tucked behind the fire station on the edge of Maple Hollow. The house was plain gray siding, creaky floorboards, and a kitchen that smelled like burnt toast more often than not. But to the girls, it felt like a world apart from the cold kitchen floor they had been found on. It had heat, it had light, and most of all, it had Valor. The German Shepherd had become something between a guardian and a shadow. He followed the twins from room to room, never straying more than a few feet. At bedtime, he curled between their 2 mattresses, his back pressed against one, his paw resting lightly on the other. During bath time, he lay just outside the door, ears tilted toward the sound of running water and occasional giggles. And when Arya had woken from a nap and tried to find the bathroom alone, it had been Valor who nosed the hallway light switch and led her there, step by step, without a single bark. Eli watched all of it with a quiet ache in his chest. He was a man built from angles tall, dark-skinned, with a soldier's stance, and the kind of gaze that had once scanned rooftops for snipers. But here, in this strange new domesticity, his movements had softened. He brewed coffee with one hand while flipping eggs with the other. He folded tiny pairs of socks with a kind of reverence. He had always thought war had broken something in him permanently, but now he wondered if maybe it had just left space for something to be rebuilt. The twins were different, too. Ava, the more reserved of the two, had begun drawing again. She filled page after page with crayon scenes of Valor, of their new room, of a sun so big it filled the whole sky. Arya was chattier, prone to sudden questions and wild stories about talking trees and secret tunnels beneath the house. But whenever Eli mentioned their parents or asked anything about their past, both girls would fall silent. Their hands would clutch Valor's fur, and their eyes would drift downward like curtains drawn tight. Eli didn't press. He knew enough about trauma to recognize a wall when he saw one. Instead, he focused on the present. Warm meals, clean sheets, laughter when it came, and the slow, steady hum of safety returning to their small world. It was Diane Monroe who suggested the visit. You don't have to take them, she said, sipping coffee in his kitchen one morning. But it might help them process. The grandmother Lorraine, she's stable now. Lucid some days. She asks about them. Eli leaned back in his chair. Would they even recognize her? They did once, Diane said. That still means something. So on Saturday, Eli dressed the girls in their warmest coats, Ava in rose pink, Aria in a dusty blush, and drove them to the Willow Rest Care Home. Valor sat between their car seats, his big head resting on Aria's knee. Neither girl spoke during the ride, but they didn't resist either. Willow Rest was a bright place with pale green walls and wide windows that looked out onto a frozen pond. Inside, everything smelled like lavender and lemon polish. The receptionist, a plump, cheery woman named Elsie, greeted them with a softness that made Aria shyly wave. Lorraine Bell was seated in the sunroom, her legs covered with a patchwork quilt, a cup of lukewarm tea resting on the table beside her. She wore a lavender cardigan over a white blouse with small blue buttons. Her silver hair had been brushed into soft curls that framed her face, though her expression was vacant as she stared out the window. When the girls approached, Ava held back. Aria walked forward first, Valor by her side. Lorraine turned toward them, blinking as if trying to place a familiar tune. Elizabeth, she said, voice trembling, why are you still so small? Aria stopped in front of her, unsure. No, Lorraine murmured. You're not, but you look just like her. Are you real? Eli stepped closer. Lorraine, these are your granddaughters, Ava and Aria. She blinked again. Slowly, her gaze moved from Ava's hesitant face to Aria's outstretched hand. Then she smiled thinly, faintly but with recognition. I used to tell you about cinnamon waffles, she whispered. Aria nodded. You said they were magic. They chased away bad dreams. Lorraine's eyes welled up. Did they? Aria looked down. Not always. The old woman reached for her hand, and the girl let her take it. I forgot, Lorraine said. I didn't mean to. My head, it lets go without asking. We remember for you, Aria said simply. Valor lay down beside them, head between his paws as if he, too, understood the weight of the moment. Ava finally stepped forward. She stood by Eli's leg, not speaking, but she didn't turn away. Lorraine looked up at her, and for a split second her eyes cleared. You have her eyes, she said. Elizabeth's. So serious. So kind. A nurse stepped in after a few minutes, gently suggesting a break. Lorraine was tiring fast. Before they left, she pulled Aria close and kissed her cheek. Tell the dog thank you, she said. He brought you back. Back in the truck, the girls were quiet again. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the ridge, casting long shadows across the snow. Eli kept his eyes on the road, hands steady on the wheel. Halfway home, Aria spoke. Grandma's heart remembers, even when her head doesn't. Eli nodded. Yeah, I think that's true. Ava, still staring out the window, whispered, Is Mom in heaven? Eli swallowed. I believe so. She nodded, then leaned over to Valor and pressed her cheek against his fur. He didn't move, just blinked, slow and steady. That night, as the girls settled into bed, Ava placed a crayon drawing on the nightstand. It was of three figures again, two little girls, one tall man, and a dog with a golden star on his chest. Above them, written in crooked handwriting, were the words, He came when no one else did. The courthouse in Maple Hollow was built from pale stone and quiet decisions. It stood at the end of Birch Street, just across from the library and next to an old oak tree whose roots had cracked the pavement over time. Inside, room 204 smelled faintly of lemonwood polish and paper aged by the weight of judgment. There were only 3 rows of benches, one flag that sagged slightly at the tip, and a single high window through which sunlight spilled like hope, trying to find its way in. Eli Grant sat in the front row, his hands clasped loosely between his knees. He wore a clean-collared shirt tucked into dark slacks, his army boots freshly brushed. His face, usually stern in its silence, was softened by something unspoken, a quiet resolve, or maybe a quiet plea. Next to him sat Diane Monroe, poised and unreadable in her navy suit. Her clipboard rested flat on her lap, untouched. And between them, clutching Valor's leash like it was a lifeline, sat Ava and Arya. The twins had been dressed carefully that morning, matching pale blue dresses with white cardigans, their brown hair neatly combed and held back by identical sunflower clips. Arya had drawn a smiling sun in purple pen on the back of her left hand. Ava had tucked a crayon into her sock. They looked small in the courtroom's stiff wooden benches. Small but steady. Valor sat at their feet, his posture alert but calm, his fur brushed to a sheen. His dark eyes scanned the room like he understood the gravity of the moment. He hadn't left the girl's side since the hospital. No one had dared ask him to. At precisely 9 a.m., the double doors opened and Judge Virginia Langston entered. She was in her early 60s, tall and commanding, with a no-nonsense stride. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back into a tight chignon, and she wore no jewelry aside from a simple gold band on her left hand. Her voice when she spoke was firm but never harsh-like, gravel softened by rain. "Court is now in session," she said. "Docket 14-932. Guardianship petition for minors Ava and Arya Bell, filed by Mr. Eli Grant." She adjusted her glasses and looked up, eyes sharp. "Mr. Grant, are you prepared to proceed?" Eli stood. "Yes, Your Honor." "Please state your case." He didn't read from a paper, didn't bring notes. He simply took a breath and began. "I was working a community response when I found the girl," he said. "It was snowing that morning. Roads were quiet. We weren't looking for anyone. But Valor, my K-9 partner, he stopped at their house, barked until I listened." He paused, glancing down at the twins. "I broke the door in, found them in the kitchen, alone, cold, starving, and still alive. Because they hadn't given up. They were 6 years old, and they hadn't given up." His voice didn't waver, but the silence in the room deepened. "I'm not their family by blood," he continued, "but I've seen what they've been through. I've watched them come back to life in the smallest ways, laughing at burnt toast, falling asleep because they know someone will be there when they wake. They don't need perfect. They need consistent. They need safe." He looked to the judge. "I don't know what kind of father I'll be, but I know what kind of man I won't be. I won't walk away." Diane stood next. Her voice was measured, professional. "The girls show marked improvement in physical health and emotional stability since being placed in Mr. Grant's care," she said. "They have gained weight. Their nightmares have lessened. They have begun to speak freely and show signs of trust. Their connection to both Mr. Grant and the service dog Valor has been critical to that progress." Judge Langston nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Monroe." Then, after a pause, she turned to the bench where the girls sat. "May I ask you both a question?" Arya looked at Ava. Ava gave a single nod. The judge's tone softened. "If you could live anywhere," she said gently, "where would you feel safest?" Ava opened her mouth. Her voice was quiet but clear. "Where Valor is," Arya added, "and Mr. Eli too. But Valor doesn't leave." The courtroom fell still. Judge Langston looked down at the files, then back at the trio before her. She removed her glasses, set them carefully on the desk, and spoke. "Temporary guardianship granted to Mr. Eli Grant for a probationary period of 6 months, pending regular wellness checks and follow-up evaluations." She looked at Valor. "And in light of the minor's unique psychological dependency on the certified K-9, I see no reason he should be excluded from their daily environment." Her gavel dropped, light but final. 3 days later, a local newspaper published the story. The headline read, "The Dog Who Barked Once and Gave 2 Girls a Father." The article, written by a young reporter named Jasper Holloway, 27, with a mop of curly blonde hair and a fondness for stories that didn't end in court records, included a photograph of the trio leaving the courthouse. Ava was holding Valor's leash. Arya was holding Eli's hand. By the end of the week, neighbors had left everything from teddy bears to lasagna trays on Eli's porch. Someone knit matching scarves for the twins. A 4th-grade class from across town mailed drawings of dogs with capes and badges. Eli had to move the mailbox to the steps because the postman couldn't fit anything else inside. That night, Eli stood in the doorway of their small living room, coffee mug in hand, watching the two girls curl up on the couch beneath a patchwork blanket. Aria was humming. Ava was drawing something with her crayons. Valor lay on the floor beside them, his body curved protectively around their legs. Eli didn't speak. He just breathed in the room, the faint smell of hot cocoa and peanut butter toast, the sound of laughter, the soft thump of crayons on paper, the sigh of a dog who knew his job wasn't over. But maybe it had changed. He thought of Lena then, thought of her laugh and the way she used to whisper to him after rough deployments. "You're not broken. You're just waiting for the right mission." Maybe this was it. Maybe these girls, this dog, this house full of warm, mismatched furniture wasn't a mission. Maybe it was home. Sometimes the strongest guardians wear fur, and the quietest heroes speak with a single bark. In a world that often forgets to listen, it was a dog who refused to walk away, and a soldier who knew what it meant to stay. If you believe that love can be reborn in the most unexpected places, and that family isn't always about blood, but about who shows up, then let this story remind you, no act of loyalty is ever wasted. Comment, "He stayed," if this story touched your heart. And if you believe every child deserves a safe home, don't forget to like this video and follow our channel for more stories of quiet courage and second chances.